Guardian Academy Core Concepts Recapture and Reallocate series. This one's a little bit different, which I will break down shortly. It is a core concept. You've probably seen this a million times by now. Just little shield in the corner here means core concept. You want to come back to it over and over and over. You're not supposed to get it the first time around, all the way back to open loops. These are things that we want to consume and reflect on and observe, and then come back and do it over and over. It's iterative because all learning is iterative. Core concepts are the ones that you're going to come back to the most often. And of course, here's the tiers. We'll get to that later. This training, whether you're watching the video, listening to the audio, or reading the article, it is a conceptual framework. Your brain is going to want all the details. Fight that urge. Like, we have to understand the conceptual framework in which this all fits in, so that it becomes part of our operating system. It's not memorizing details. It's knowing what to look for. It's also a reference manual. So you can kind of say, all right, well, it's time to recapture, reallocate. You can come to this training or this article, and the resources are there for you to self-study. I'm going to refer to some other resources because they're good resources. They're out there, and that's how good curriculum is built, in my opinion, is multiple perspectives and kind of piecing together disparate pieces of information. So first, make sure that you see the recapture and reallocate in the foundations. That sets the foundation for the rest of this training. And if for some reason you haven't seen that, go back and watch that really quick, or read it or listen to it, whichever you prefer. Here's the concepts and the resources. So when it comes time to recapture and reallocate, when you're ready to make time in your calendar to actually implement, the concepts and resources are in this training. Okay, the first one is volatility and velocity. And in regards to velocity, it's understanding the difference and operating in a way that suggests you understand the difference between velocity and speed. Okay, so we're looking at volatility, or like vicissitude, and velocity. I don't know why it's all a bunch of V words. Volatility, velocity, and the difference between velocity and speed. Because when we talk about resource allocation, we're assuming that you have your solvable problem. That means you are purpose-driven. If you have no purpose, these frameworks won't help you. So you go back to solvable problem, have a conversation with important people, have a conversation with yourself on your deathbed, whatever you got to do. But you have to have something that you are looking to achieve an appropriate timeline. Otherwise, this won't be super meaningful to you. So if you are here and you want to get here in an appropriate timeline, resource allocation is really important. Again, go back to resource allocation training. The best way to get more resources is to recapture the ones that are being hemorrhaged. So if you imagine any travel, any trip, you're driving from here to here, the straighter the line, the less resources it takes, right? The less time, the less effort, the less bandwidth in remembering the directions, the less gasoline, the less actual fuel it will take. So in a perfect world, we would go straight to where we want to be. We don't live in a perfect world. So it's going to look a little bit more volatile than this. It's gonna be maybe a lot more volatile than this. So the first one is speed. Everybody wants to go fast, but speed is missing like the vector component, which is like the directionality. Okay? So you can move really fast in a big circle and use all your resources and end up in the same spot. That happens all the time. So the need for speed, there's two things to look out for with speed. And one is the direction. Okay? If you're going in the big circle, you're just wasting resources to end up in the same place. And the other is, and then what? Like the echolate view, like the ecology view, which is like you can drive really fast into a brick wall and then you're dead. Right, so speed is not the answer. What we're actually looking for is velocity, more specifically towards the thing that matters most. So from the Certainty U, CCA, you hear us say all the time, are you getting closer to what matters? That's implying velocity, right? Look how fast I moved from here to here. Like, okay, does that get you closer to what you actually want? Because that's a whole bunch of resources that went into moving fast and getting dopamine, but you didn't really get closer to what you want, right? So when we talk about resource allocation and reallocating, recapturing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to lower volatility and increase velocity. Okay? So journey might look like this. We all go backwards sometimes and we make mistakes and we think we want this. We get distracted by shiny stuff and, maybe, hopefully we don't run out of resources here before we get to the thing that matters most. So this is volatile. This is extremely volatile, and it lacks this level of velocity, right? Direction. So hopefully that makes sense. We're just trying to limit volatility and improve velocity, okay? So we want to recapture, for example, let me get a different color here. If I can show you this, pink, why not? Something like this, right? Because we all get off track a little bit. The amount of resources that go into getting us here could easily get us here because we've eliminated this waste. Not only getting off track was wasteful, but all the resource it takes to get back on track is wasteful, which brings us to bumpers, right? Bumpers, it's my book. I'll link to it. It's very short. It's very actionable. There's also a full training that goes with it. I'll give you that for free. It'll be in the resources here. But it's learn to appreciate when bad things don't happen. Or in other words, when you don't go so far off track, right? Every time you dig yourself a hole, it takes resources to dig the hole, and then it takes resources to dig back out. Now you've expended a ton of resources to end up in the same place, right? So you can move really fast. You could dig yourself in a hole and dig yourself out, and there's a lot of movement, and you feel like you're doing a lot, but you're in the same place. Hey, so bumpers is just conceptually saying, all right, what are the preventative controls? We want to think in terms of preventative controls that we can put up, like right here. Like maybe you went way off track because you went out drinking one night and made a bunch of mistakes and yada, yada, yada. So maybe one of our bumpers is, I don't go out drinking anymore. And what that does is that prevents us from recapturing all of this, recapturing all of this, recapturing all of this. It's not perfection, but like bumpers in a bowling alley, it keeps us out of the gutter. Okay? So if we can recapture all of this by putting in preventative controls that just prevent us from going this far off the rails, we actually recapture a ton of time, attention, money, resources. It could be trust from other people. Those are all resources. So we want to think in terms of preventative controls. My book does walk through how to do that. There's a million ways you can figure it out, but it's really what are the things that, not so much how do I move forward, but you can look and say, how do I stop making mistakes? Those are preventative controls, which Dan talks about in his book, Rigging the Game, which I will link to as well. Okay. The second is the 2 Oreo principle. You can go back to Recapture, Reallocate overview. We talk about the 2 Oreo principle, break it down. I'll give you some links for 2 Oreo as well. This is just a matter of not dying by a death from 1,000 paper cuts. It's, what are the little things slipping through the cracks that are adding up that we can recapture so that they stop slipping through the cracks. It's like plugging the holes in the leaky bucket. Okay? Quickest way to fill the bucket with water is to plug the holes first. So that's the 2 Oreo principle. The resources will be linked here. And again, it's in the Recapture, Reallocate overview if you want to step by step. The third is the profit priority methodology. That is the Dan's methodology for Certain to You in the CCA program. And it's broken down in the resource allocation. That's just where we recapture resources going into lower priorities and reallocate them to higher priorities. That's tough to do because we've got to be honest with ourselves. Full training is in there. Okay, in resource allocation, it is just a video or two above this one. The fourth is 3 rhythms. I'll give you some resources that break down the 3 rhythms. It's advanced and it's most relevant to you if you own a business, and not everybody here obviously owns a business. Most of the Wolfpack leaders and above do or are thinking about it. So they'll be more advanced, but I will drop some resources so you can kind of understand. It's just recognizing that an industry has a rhythm. Okay, like if you're an accountant, there's a rhythm to tax season, tax deadlines. You make business decisions that create a rhythm. Maybe you collect all the money up front. Maybe you do payment plans. Maybe you do financing. Maybe you do open enrollment. Maybe you do closed enrollment for cohorts or groups. Those are business decisions. And you have personal rhythms, right? There's just times of the year when you're in a good mood, times of the year when you're in a bad mood, and they tend to be consistent. These 3 rhythms can start playing off each other and become very wasteful. Just again, for example, if you're in the fitness industry, New Year's resolutioners is a rhythm. So if you have New Year's resolutioners and you choose to take all their payments up front, and you don't account for the fact that those are both, one's a rhythm, one's a decision, then you might have low cash flow later in the year because you took all the money up front and spent it. And that might put you in a really bad place where you start making really bad decisions, and so on and so forth. So if we understand the rhythms, we could smooth out the volatility and get more velocity. And brain sludge, outcome bias, and self-respect, this is a huge one. It's time, attention, bandwidth. This is probably where people waste the most amount of resources and get led in the wrong direction, and sometimes they never recover. Sometimes they have to spend years and a lot of money and time and attention getting back on track. That's actually going to be the next video. Okay, so brain sludge. So you can take these 5 resources and implement them. Like sit down, think about it, implement it, reflect on it, talk about it, with the intent of recapturing waste and reallocating to things that matter. Again, all we're really doing here is we are trying to get turn this into something a little less volatile. And not because volatility is bad, but because going off track requires resources. This isn't good or bad. This is just resource allocation. This is recapturing. Every time you overshoot too far in one direction, if you can prevent yourself from overshooting, then you can recapture all of the resources it took to shoot that far and recover back. Okay, it's a different way to think about it. Again, this is just a conceptual framework. All of the details and stuff get worked out in the community and higher trainings, but you have to be able to process and think in terms of, where I waste resources, I could recapture them and reallocate them, and that gives me an advantage. I don't necessarily need more. I don't know if I need more, because I might be able to recapture what I've wasted, reallocate it, and get to where I want to be. And that's a much easier, faster, safer way to close the gap. Live to learn, give to earn. If this was useful, if you have questions, experiences, anything like that, drop your 6-word updates, drop it in the community. If you do recapture, reallocate, if you go through these exercises, share your experience, help others see different ways to look at this. You're going to think of some ways to apply this that I am not thinking about right now. And it's extremely valuable to others if you share it so that they can also get their wheels spinning and start to implement as well. Next video, again, is going to be brain sludge. That is, it's a little bit more esoteric, but it is incredibly important for people that feel like you need more energy or more attention or more motivation. All right, I'll see you there.